Hello, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to Pharma IQ. My name is Rhiannon Charladay, your conference director and host for our Smart Lab Digital online event. Now, if you did miss anything from day one, don't worry, you'll receive an email and you'll be able to re-watch all of those sessions on demand for up to a month, and equally anything you've missed prior to this session. You'll be able to rewatch everything. But before we kick off, we're going to be having more of a discussion today about addressing workforce challenges in pharma, utilising augmented reality. But before we do, a quick reminder of what you can see there on your screen. It's super toggle friendly. So you'll see a resource centre. Any materials that are in that centre, feel free to download them. They're free and available, and we do suggest you take advantage of that to download. And you'll see that Q&A widget. So any questions that you do have for Renee, pop them into that box, hit submit, and we can get round to asking those questions at the end. And you'll see Renee's speaker bio profile there on the right hand side. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn and carry the conversation on. And you'll also see share this event. So if you've enjoyed any of the sessions that have gone before this one, please feel free to share with your colleagues and circulate that. So without further ado, then let's now focus on more of our discussion today, addressing workforce challenges, utilising augmented reality. I'm delighted to be joined by Renee Zolfeld, Director of Business Development Life Sciences at PTC. Renee, welcome to the floor, and thank you very much for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you also for having me here, and good morning, good afternoon, depending on what part of the world you tuned in.
So Renee, before we kick off, I mean, there's many complex and high costs associated with implementation of different technologies when it comes to, say, trying to enhance lab automation, digitization. And I think there's elements of that traditional training and workforce structure that is changing. So I guess we want to be discussing how we can look at utilizing and leveraging digital capabilities and technologies to increase the way in which we enhance our workforce flow and productivity and scalability across the lab. So before we kick off, Renee, it'd be worth us talking about yourself, your role, and actually PTC.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So yeah, maybe I start with myself. So I'm, as you already said, I'm working as a director for business development, particular focus on the life sciences industry. And when I say life sciences industry, I mean manufacturers of medical devices, but also in vitro diagnostic devices, and of course, pharmaceutical manufacturers. And my role is actually to get a better understanding what the necessary requirements and challenges and needs of the industry are, and then map this with the technology and solution that PTC is offering. And for those, I can imagine there's some attendees that don't know PTC that much. We are an American-based software company. We are headquartered in the Boston area, and we are in this since the beginning. Actually, I must say, PTC has focused on digitizing business processes for its customers. So, as said, totally focused on software, providing software to our clients, and we started in the mid of the 80s with revolutionizing the CAD business. And then from there evolved over time. And we are, as of now, we are one of the leading manufacturers or providers of augmented reality solutions, but also IoT solutions for, I would say, most of the industries. Yeah, so we, of course, originated from the discrete manufacturing space, but nowadays we are also having a lot of discussions and implementations of our technology in pharmaceutical companies and also in med device companies and in vitro diagnostic device companies.
Awesome. Thank you for that intro, Renee. And I think let's touch on the element you mentioned there where you're assessing ultimately the trends or noticing what's actually happening within the pharmaceutical sector. So what are you seeing as the three top main challenges when it comes to, say, lab workflow optimization?
Yeah, I would say there are things that are related to the people working in the lab. Yeah, so in particular, and maybe I can pull up a slide also for that. So one thing that I believe is something that is really challenging for the industry, in particular when it comes to lab, is how the workforce in the lab can be utilized much more efficient than it is today. So we still see a lot of manual processes, a lot of paper-based processes. And this also relates to the second point where I see big pressure in the lab is really how the operating costs of the lab can be can be streamlined. Yeah, although this is something that is definitely depending on the part or the kind of the lab we are talking. So I would say the impact of reducing costs is much higher on, for instance, the quality control labs. But when it comes also for the research labs, I would see some trends of getting more costs out of the process and making the labs as such more efficient. And with that, most of the companies think they could help by streamlining the processes, by improving the efficiency, and also helping to contribute to the to revenue increases. So when you say workforce efficiency, I primarily want to point out that we see challenges in particular in onboarding new people, and even in the labs we see the situation that there are gaps in filling open positions in the lab. So having the right skilled people that are capable of doing basic research, but also running through, let's say, routine experiments, for instance. And this, as said, has an impact also on how the people can be bring up to speed much faster. And one important thing also is what we have seen is how can the labs improve the reproducibility. So assuring that what was successful could also be applied in a different lab or in a different location with the same result. And when it comes to operating costs, one really essential part is that's also related to the workforce efficiency is training and of course compliance costs. Very important thing, in particular in that industry, is how can we assure that the things we are doing, even in the lab, comply with the rules, comply with the regulations, with the procedures that an organization wants to have people to fulfill. And then, as said already, having that kind of increased revenue with, for instance, the research scale, but also throughput. So what we learned during the conversation with pharma is that the more experiments a lab can do, the higher the possibility to sort out the things that might not be successful, and maybe coming much faster to a point where you could say this could be the next, so to say, blockbuster, to follow on and focus on the things that are necessary and that are most or might have the biggest success criteria for the organization.
Yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned that, because the training element is so crucial, and equally looking at those operational costs and the reduction there. I guess for those that may be more embryonic within their digitization, automation journey, what do you believe the necessary steps are to take? And equally, if they're mid trying to go to mature, what's the advice there about steps that need to be taken?
So most of the discussions are centered, I would say, as you summarized the first statement, is around two main things. On the one hand, it's the people that are working in the lab, and the other thing is about the systems and the equipment that is used in the lab. So I would say let's take one minute to spend on the second part. So I think the steps to come to a higher grade of automation is definitely to connect the systems, because when you have connectivity to systems, then you could also start connecting data. And once you have connected data, then you could start thinking about automation. Because if you do not understand, and if you do not see what data is created, why is it created, and where is it created, you are limited in driving this actually along the whole process. And with that, also automating the workflows. When it comes to people, I would say it is a bit different, because what I think here is definitely an effort to start training the people in a different way. Because what we experience also is that we have this lack, of skills. We also see people coming into the organization that are used to work with different technologies. I mean, if you reflect, you and I, we are using our smartphones, we are using our tablets on a daily basis, and we are used to use the technology for different purposes. And this is what we also experience for the people that are coming into the labs. They expect other technologies, and then they also would rate companies by the use of digital technologies and the maturity. And here we see in particular the use of augmented reality as something that could help to speed up the process of getting people familiar with processes, but also with the equipment that is used in the lab, so that they could much faster and easier be trained on how to run through a specific process with augmented guidance. And for those of you who are not so familiar with augmentation or augmented reality, actually it's a technology that overlays the physical world with digital information. The digital data is usually not there. It's somewhere usually on a computer or on a database. And augmented reality takes this data and augments it, so put this in the context of the real world, so that you, for instance, get sensor data, that you can get additional descriptions at the point where you currently are. And we see augmented reality as something that helps to train people faster and making it also more sustainable, instead of reading books or in reading SOPs.
And I guess with that, I know you mentioned at the start that training effectiveness, and with that, going back to the embryonic mid part of that journey or roadmap, bridging the skills gap seems to be quite crucial. And I guess it would be worth us trying to unpick what that biggest challenge is for pharma companies that is preventing them from increased efficiency within the lab.
Yeah, so this is a very, very interesting point, and we have done a study together with the Fraunhofer Institute in Stuttgart in Germany. And this is a very interesting thing. What we found out is that 25% of the working time of people working in a lab is spent with non-value adding tasks. So what this could be, for instance, long waiting times, this could be equipment maintenance, this could be long search times, this could be cleaning operations, sample logistics, and so on and so forth. So, and then here we think that when it comes to this skills gap, we see that sometimes the lab people or the people working in the lab, they are not so familiar with the operating of the equipment, or they are dealing with not on a regular basis with the equipment, and need to rethink what the right procedure was, or what the right steps were to operate an equipment in the laboratory. We also see that we in particular in the research lab, we do not have this routine tasks, I would say. Yeah, so, and this is why people need more often guidance on how to do a specific workflow. And this then also relates to things, maybe to pull that up, is that when we want to address people and when we want to skill them up, we see that the current methodologies we are using, pharma is using, they're inefficient and oftentimes costly. Yeah, imagine that you also think, when you think about maintaining an SOP, creating and maintaining an SOP, is when you need to do this on a Word document, it's time consuming, and it actually not also only from the creation, but also from the maintaining. And you need to also make sure then how to distribute it across the different labs that you're operating. And also the SOPs are very lengthy and complex. And this again also is sometimes a challenge for the people working, because it is actually sometimes hard to go through a complete SOP and just reading it. And we have seen that when you get trained, when you get educated by visual instructions, and this is where augmented reality comes into the play, visual instructions are much more sustainable, and it's much more natural for people to learn things that they have seen compared to things that they have read through. And another thing also is documentation. It's a very important topic in the lab, because we want to make sure, or pharma wants to make sure, that experiments are done not only, that specific setups of experiments are done if they fail only once, so that we need to document the results out of an experiment. We need to document even the successful things, and we need to free the resources of the people to do the documentation in a much easier way. So, without bridging this skills gap that we also see, it's really hard, we believe, in the future, for the research labs to come to that speed of executing, running experiments as it would be required to be more efficient in generating the results.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, and we do need to move away so that we are paperless. And I totally agree. SOPs are lengthy and complex, and we do need to be embracing that change and moving up to speed. I guess it would be nice, Renee, to touch on any use cases that you may have to shed light on the benefits of digital capabilities in the lab to enhance that workflow optimization.
Yeah. So I would maybe also distinguish here a little bit, and taking it, if you allow, a bit broader from a digitization perspective. So of course, when you think of, maybe we can start with the AR, the augmented reality. So what we can do, and what are typical use cases, is really give them guidance, give the people guidance for a specific task they need to do, or they run through. The other thing is also to helping them, and that's also critical, in particular when we are in maybe biologic labs, is helping them visualize critical information, biohazard information, or any other hazardous information, or allowing them to work hands-free without always looking into a paper-based documentation. So, very nice example, we discussed it with the pharma. They said, there are people working in a biohazard lab, and they're making notes on a piece of paper, and then they're taking that piece of paper out to their desktop to record the data in an Excel. And the people said, you know what, this is totally unsafe, because you don't actually know if that paper isn't contaminated. So, or if there's any substance that you have worked on, then transport it into your normal office space, right? Then the other thing is also, and that's related to that, is keeping them safe and in compliance. by providing them
Mm-hmm.
information on what is the right tool they should use, what is the safety procedure they should follow, what are the equipment they should use to protect themselves, and again, letting them operate hands-free. And the last thing I would say here when it comes to augmented reality is allowing them to interact with the physical world in context. So providing data, providing information, and let them also, let's say, feedback information into systems or into a documentation for the things they are doing. When we extend it a little bit and also talk about maybe the broader use of digital technologies in the lab, we see also the application of IoT technology, for instance, to support the lab technician along the whole process. So there's one very, I would say, easy, but sometimes challenging process is the lab technicians, the people in the lab, sometimes they need to order replenishment parts, they need to order consumables, and for that, often companies have 3, 4, 5 shops where the technician can order. So, but he needs to know what part to order where. So he needs to log in the different systems and to see whether this part is available there or must be consumed or ordered in another shop. So one interesting use case that we have discussed or that we discuss regularly with pharma is, what about providing a kind of a shop interface that let the lab technician just enter the parts that he needs and then send that information and let it distribute automatically in the background. And this again goes back to the point that I made earlier, connecting the systems and connecting the data. That would allow us such implementation of such use cases, and with that then streamlining and optimizing the processes for the lab technicians.
Really, really good points here. And I guess just touching on those use cases then, any additional advice that you would say pharma needs to take to leverage technology? Because that revolutionizing the lab is happening and it will happen. It's inevitable. It's just, I guess, at what speed of adoption it will happen depending on the organization. So what's that 101 piece of advice you would give, Renee, to those that are looking to embark on this journey?
I would say a very good thing to start with is analyzing and understanding the processes in the lab, and I would say most of the labs know what the current situation is. If not, it's really worth to see where are gaps, where are possibilities for the technology. So, and then what is important is also to see what use cases have an impact, not only for one lab, but maybe for multiple labs across the organization, because then you could really scale with the respective use cases. And then also what could be of interest, what we've seen is that, I said in the beginning, we are offering software solutions to support in particular IoT and augmented reality use cases. And we have actually 2 solutions that we classify as low-touch solutions, which means those solutions can be implemented without high effort, but could generate benefit. For instance, one solution of that is targeted for remote assistance. And here, a very easy use case is, imagine you have a clean room lab, and someone is in that clean room and having an issue with one of the equipments, or is not needs some guidance. So what today happens is that they are calling someone and needs to dress and needs to be prepared to be in a safe environment. Then he's entering the clean room, then he's helping that. And this usually, the whole procedure of getting dressed for the clean room and getting undressed afterwards is taking much more time than just fixing the issue. So imagine this person in the clean room could establish a remote assistance call with that expert, and then let the expert guide him without having the need to be in the room as such. Or even one thing that we found out with the Fraunhofer also was that often the people would be heavily interested in getting the current status of the usage of an equipment in the lab, because they maybe are in the phase of trying to plan their own procedure, and having access to the equipment in the lab remotely and seeing what is the current experiment running, who's responsible for that, what is the status of the equipment, that again also would provide additional value for the people in the lab. So again, looking into the labs, understanding what the major barriers are today, and then maybe also starting with low-touch solutions that definitely would have a value add for the lab technicians, but also maybe for the lab managers to understand how the labs are used and where there might be capacity for additional scheduling or additional experiments to be scheduled.
Okay, great advice, Renee. I appreciate that. And it would be nice to walk through augmented reality actually, and how that can support lab workflow. So
I would say, let's maybe pull that up. So what we can do in augmented reality are different things. Yeah. So as said, we could do, first of all, we can help to do the on-job training. Of course, everyone needs to have a kind of a basic training, but if the situation is that you cannot remember completely what is the next steps to perform, it would be helpful to have an augmented reality application or solution that could guide you and can give you the support that you need at a certain step in the workflow. This could be then, and that's important, it could be then on demand, because the user, the lab technician, can decide whether and when he needs this guidance. That's one thing. The other thing is then also for the step-by-step lab procedures. So if you want to guide people what they should do and how they should proceed, then we could use the technology to run them step-by-step through a certain procedure, and also using the technology to maybe help to document the result of the different steps. So I don't know, recording the temperature of the sensor that for a specific equipment that has been recorded in accordance with this. With the step that has just been executed, or as said, saying them where to go next, what to do next, and so on and so forth. And the other thing where we also see the AR, how we could support this, is definitely, and this was also an outcome of this study we did, is operating the equipment and preparing the equipment. So a lot of time spent on preparing the equipment, setting the equipment rightly up. And here again, augmented reality can definitely help to streamline this, because we can, and it's interesting with the combination of IoT, for instance, we can combine device status information with the augmented reality data, so that we can, for an example, for instance, we can visualize whether this equipment has been turned on or turned off. So maybe also assuring that the equipment is in a safe state, so that you can start with preparing for the next experiment, or for changing some of the parts that need to be changed because you're preparing for the next run, or for cleaning procedures, and so on and so forth. And you could also then assure that once you have completed and then switch the device on, whether it's in a normal operating state or not. So there are different different areas, and as I said, one easy or an early thing or an easy thing to start with is really to help people get trained, then maybe guiding them step by step, and lastly, then also helping them to prepare equipment, maybe also do some easy maintenance tasks, some service tasks of the equipment, and they're also then combining the data from the equipment with the context this equipment is operated.
And that actually leads me nicely onto a question we have here from Alexander, who's mentioned that he loves the use of training as that entry point into the industry. And he was asking about, once that's adopted by clients, where else have you seen product progress in parts of the pharma organization?
So interestingly, I must say, when we start the discussions with pharma, we often, and that's really interesting, and we often do not start in the lab actually. So we often start in the production, and often we also start in the areas where there's maintenance people operating. So in particular, when it comes to really routine maintenance tasks and also changeover or format change tasks. And so education is definitely, and then here we are really using this for education purposes. But the other thing then really is to doing on-the-job guidance. So when they are doing something, then providing them in context the guidance on what to do next, which tool they need to use, what are specific parameters to be considered, and so on and so forth. So yeah, absolutely. So training is a very good first thing, but from there we could also then evolve into guidance, and helping people to be more effective in doing some works.
When it comes to, because putting actually the employees at the center of the organization is key, right? So when we're looking at that implementation of augmented reality, how do we center the employees who'll be using AR in the implementation strategy?
Very important thing, and also a learning. And I again want to cite the study we did with Fraunhofer. One important thing is involving the people that needs to work early on, because there are there's resistance, because it is changing the way people work. So, and we need to involve the people early on, in particular when we think about the technology used to display the information. Yeah, many people think about that we need to wear glasses. So I don't know, HoloLenses, RealWear, Google, whatever. We have to wear glasses every day to get this information. And then they think about, oh, is this safe? Can I use it? Can I wear glass? Can I wear a HoloLens on top of my safety glasses, and so on and so forth? So all of those discussions, right? So taking the people right from the beginning, discussing with them about the impact, about the benefits, but also letting people articulate what they would expect as additional information. So what we also learned is that sometimes when we just maybe from an IT or solutions perspective would implement those technologies, we would overload the people with information that is not needed for the specific task or the specific step within a workflow. So involving them, asking them what is necessary, what exactly would you need at that specific point, and then trying to understand also, so usability, ergonomics, is all of the things that need to be considered, and this needs to take into consideration when you design a solution. And like with many other technologies, I would say you would have maybe only one shot to get it right. So the recommendations really involve the people as early and take the right people, maybe the more innovative ones, but also some that are a little bit, a little bit hesitant to change or to adopt to change, and then working with them together and let them experiment, let them early on experiment, and then evolve the applications over time. So providing really an agile, or applying an agile approach in developing the solutions for the specific use case.
Agreed. Bringing people on and onboarding in that journey is crucial. And René, I want to touch on ROI, really important element here, and that's measuring the investment in augmented reality and on ROI possibly, and if so, is it possible and how?
It is absolutely. So, and just pull up this slide here, just to give you a little bit of context also what the value of AR even in pharma and even in pharma labs could be. So this is an example from a pharma company, and they applied our technology in the mid of last year, and they wanted to have it was about enabling people to do a specific kind of an experiment. Yeah, and they wanted to scale this knowledge among many people. So, and when you compare those figures, so on the left-hand side, we see the number of experiments they did over 2019, 2020 without using AR. So all of the left part is without using AR. So you could see that they could run 84 experiments. They had 38% of errors due to human error. They also needed some significant time on rework because of the errors. They needed to redo the experiment. They needed to restart some of the things, and that counted up to let's say to more than 200 or roughly 200K without the AR. So when you compare with the right-hand side there, they used our technology. They did actually the same. It was the same procedures with a broader group of people. They could run even if it was not the complete year we monitored. So I said they had this. They had the first results in, I guess it was in September last year. They started early in 2021. And they could increase the number of experiments. But more importantly, I would say 0 errors, 0 hours of rework. And with that, if you accumulate this, actually no costs associated with failures and rework. So, and this is something where I would say we could maybe have the ROI between, I would say between 6-12 months, something like that. So this really contributes to the efficiency and contributes really to the cost position of a lab. Yeah. So and this really, even if you consider that they have done much more experiments, this results were achieved. So there is definitely one, but this is also going back to the point about the use case. So it's necessary to understand what the best use case is, and then, as said, starting to review how the technology can contribute to a value. And this is usually what we also do, is in the first round discussing with clients about most valuable use cases, and also then identifying what steps would be necessary and evaluating what the contribution of a specific use case to a value position could be.
And I guess, Renee, before we close, I mean, there's so much information here. What would you say those key closing remarks or takeaway should be for the audience to go away with today?
Yeah, maybe as a closing remark, I would say we are really at the beginning of digitizing, and then putting also from a pharma perspective, putting laboratories into the scope. We are right at the beginning, I would say. Yeah, so we usually they start in the manufacturing. In manufacturing, we have higher grade of automation. We also have maybe sometimes a higher pressure on costs. And labs are starting. So labs are starting getting into the focus. And here we see very rather low maturity when it comes to applying digital technologies. We also see that there's a difference in depending on what kind of company we are having. So I can tell you from a Central European perspective, when we deal with family-owned businesses, they tend to be a little bit slower in adopting new technologies compared to maybe stock-traded companies. So the maturity is different, but we see a huge demand for applying digital technologies also in the lab. And I think that we are at the point where we could really also focus from an industry perspective. We could focus on the lab because we have gathered first experience from other areas within pharmaceutical companies. We as a software vendor, we also have some very good experience from other industries. And here I think pharma could also learn from, and then start thinking about the use case, start seeing what the technology could add, and implement a first use case and then see what the result is and what the benefit associated to that is.
Fantastic. I think the core message here is take that first step, and that's what we were saying yesterday. We're moving in that forward trajectory anyway, so it's just a case of when, not if. So Renee, I just want to say thank you very much. I really enjoyed chatting to you here today at Pharma IQ Smart Lab Digital. So thank you very much for your time, and PTC for partnering with us on this event.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present. So I really enjoyed it, and I hope that we can meet one or the other participant of that seminar.
And to you, the audience, just a quick reminder, feel free to take advantage of that resource centre and download any of those materials for future use. We're going to be moving on now to creating a foundation for data-driven R&D in chemicals and materials organisation. So click that Join Now button. I'll meet you straight there. We'll be going live in about 15 minutes time, but just a huge thank you from Renee and to our contributors today for joining. Thank you.